Welcome to Hack Your Hascom. Today, our guest is Robert Siciliano, who is a security analyst, best-selling author, and the architect of the strategic human firewall. As one of the world's most recognizable educators in personal and corporate protection, he's the straight-talk voice for a digital age. You may have seen his expertise on CNN, Fox News, CNBC, and Anderson Cooper 360, and possibly read his insights in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and Forbes. Robert has served on the board of the Identity Theft Resource Center and is a core contributor to the Realtor Safety Initiative. He is a man who literally goes to the extremes to prove a point. Once he even bought a working ATM on Craigslist just to demonstrate how easily our secure systems can be cracked. Robert, thanks for joining us today to bring your unique perspective to our conversation.
It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
I thought today would be a great time to bring kind of your unique perspective into our world of hazard communication, with EHS compliance being what it is. I thought we could give our listeners a fresh perspective on what we do, and with your background, it makes sense. So in the IT world, you've spoken about the human blind spot, being the number one reason security programs typically fail despite strong tech. And when we look at safety audits, we see a massive overlap between safety complacency, like, for instance, a worker who skips a harness check, or security complacency, like tailgating through a secure door. Why is it human nature to cut these corners? And how do we start addressing that blind spot across the board?
Yeah, humans are, I say silly like that. But that silliness can get us into lots and lots of trouble, whether it's, safety issues, hard falls, or security issues becoming prey. It's that lack of recognizing risk is what it boils down to, because of things like optimism bias. That won't happen to me. And of course, cognitive ease, the mental state where things feel familiar and easy and non-threatening. And no one ever wants to think that, they're going to be harmed or it's going to happen to me. We're a species that gravitates towards pleasure and away from pain is how we are, And pain is recognizing risk. We don't want to think it can happen to me. So our brains are wired to prioritize efficiency, right? Over hypothetical risks. And when a shortcut doesn't result in an immediate disaster, the predictive loop reinforces the behavior is safe. We kind of go into a little bit of denial, and really, truly, this is complacency.
Mhm.
To address this, we must shift from being reactive, essentially, lecturing, instead of just training. In security, we call this micro e-learning. Use micro conversations of behavior, small, undeniable little wins to build what I call, a human firewall. By framing security or safety as preventative medicine, the organization's digital health, so to speak, we make the invisible risks feel tangible and urgent without necessarily being alarming.
Interesting. Yeah, and especially when it comes to HASCOM and other OSHA violations, there's a top 10 list of these violations, and HASCOM consistently, year after year, falls in that top 5, often because the training becomes just white noise. You've criticized companies for relying on, security theater, just checking the boxes, hoping for the best. This checking the box or else mentality, why does it often backfire? And what pattern interrupts can safety managers use to ensure the message actually sticks?
We have that same exact problem in the business of security awareness. That training that we generally provide is check the box compliance. It's there to meet regulatory standards. We provide it once a year, maybe a little bit more through micro e-learning. but then, the employee generally feels like it's not their responsibility to begin with, it's somebody else's job. Check the box training fails because it triggers cognitive ease. The brain recognizes the routine and essentially powers down. When training becomes white noise, as you say, employees stop processing risk and start rehearsing compliance. Just fix it or just, make it go away. This security theater is what we call it, creates a false sense of safety while actually human blind spots remain wide open. We just trust by default. To make the message stick, I suggest, I'm sure you've heard of this, starting with a yes ladder. Statements undeniably true to their daily experience to build rapport. A set of yeses, a psychological technique used to build compliance momentum. It by getting someone to agree with a series of small, indisputable statements. It's kind of like starting a lie detector test. The brain goes to yes to a more significant request or conclusion later. Essentially, you introduce this information gap. You identify a hazard they didn't know that they had. And this shifts them from passive listening to active predictive processing over time. You get them engaged.
Mhm. What about, because many of these trainings are on an annual basis, we fall into a pattern. Do you think this also impacts us or specifically the worker who's, oh, here it is again, my annual training, probably leading to that complacency?
Yeah, 100%. When I walk into a room to deliver a security awareness presentation, I walk into a room generally because I was hired by the company because they just want their people to care.
Right.
That's it. They just want them to care, you
Mhm.
know, that their existing compliance based training isn't really doing what it's supposed to do. And when I walk in the room and I'm introduced, I look out in the audience and I see 100 people looking at me with their arms crossed and a scowl on their face. Okay, security guy, what are you going to tell me that I don't already know? I got to
Mhm.
get back to
Mhm.
work.
Right.
I already know all this stuff. And then as I'm presenting to them, I'm actually engaging in a dialogue. I'm having a conversation with them versus like what most training is. It's a monologue. It's someone either in person or virtually, or it's e-learning, whether it's a talking head or animation, talking at them, not giving them an opportunity to ask questions or respond. And by engaging the worker, where they're at, what their worries are, what their concerns are, where they are in their own personal and professional lives regarding safety and or security for that matter, right? And actually like giving them an opportunity to express themselves and engaging them empathetically. Before you know it, like they all open up and they all like start pointing out certain things and worries and concerns that they've had over a period of time. And before you know it, like that dialogue becomes something like that the arms go down by their side. That scowl goes away and their eyes begin to open up a little bit. And now they actually like are interested in what you have to say. And it's gone from compliance to, oh, this is about me. This is about, where I'm at. This is about what I'm concerned about, which like I've been trying to tell my foreman all this time and he's not listening to me. And all of a sudden now they have a voice and it changes the game. Like most training fails to recognize the human where they're at.
Right. So you get some buy-in, it sounds like.
It's great.
Excellent. So when OSHA typically looks at violations or, what is the causation, they look at the shift length, and fatigue and risk factors that impact that. So let's say a worker is at their end of a 12-hour shift and, they're tired of looking at that same label of chemical or the intricate safety protocols, that they have to abide by at every repetitive work shift. How do we simplify these rules to ensure that there's some cognitive, maybe fluency, so they remain safe, even for, to overcome that exhaustion, that mental fatigue?
Yeah. So, in simplistic terms, of course, fatigue increases cognitive load. I know I'm no good after a certain time of the day, not for, even debating what I'm doing the next day with my wife. Like, we're just not having those conversations at 10 o'clock at night.
Mhm.
It's not going to happen.
Right.
So we try to get that stuff done early, right? But um, that cognitive load makes dense protocols invisible. Ultimately, to ensure cognitive fluency, simplify the linguistic density of safety rules,
Okay.
like high contrast icon based labels to stop a tired brain from operating on autopilot, right?
Mhm.
Address the information gap by highlighting only the most critical hazards first, uh, using that yes ladder technique, that approach where you align the rules with the worker's immediate goal of finishing the shift safely. You reduce friction, right? So not overloading them. And when a rule is easy to process, it's more likely to be followed, even at
Mhm.
11 p.m. when mental resources are depleted. I know when I'm presenting a security awareness training and the audience starts getting into the weeds in regards to all the various technologies that we need to manage risk, and they start talking about how do you change up your passcodes and how long are they supposed to be, and they just get into like all this you know messy dialogue. And my response is, listen, if it's not easy, we're not going to do it. Like, I'm 57 years old. I've got a 17-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 58-year-old honey. I'm maxed out. Like, I'm at
Right.
capacity, right?
Yeah.
And so I can only handle so much more with the, information overload that I'm already being, that's already being shotgunned at me every day with what's going on in the world today. And so I've got to make sure that in my own life, things are relatively easy and relatively convenient. So I don't want to overcomplicate things ever for my audience.
Sure.
So if it's simple, if it's easy, if it's consumable, then they're going to do it.
Excellent. Excellent. And in our world of the EHS, we have the right to know about hazardous chemicals. So if we treated, for example, using in your world, the phishing email or a social engineering attempt as a workplace hazard, much like a chemical spill, how would our internal reporting protocols need to evolve?
I love that. That's good. So treating phishing, say, we know what a phishing is, it's scammy emails, as a digital spill, right?
Mhm.
Requires shifting the blame to preventative medicine, like putting systems in place, recognizing risk. Reporting must evolve from what we call security theater, check the box, um, you know, essentially to making it as easy for them as possible. Like, just as HAZCOM protocol identifies an immediate toxin, our protocols should use a pattern interrupt, so to speak, like a one-click reporting button. An easy a telephone being readily available, an app where they can just immediately report something. By addressing this information gap, explaining why the threat was dangerous to begin with, we build um, a human that recognizing risk proactively. And when reporting this as frictionless as possible, again, utilizing that yes ladder principle, right? Employees become active sensors. They begin to anticipate risk. They begin to see it coming, um, not just victims of what might happen. So, for example, in my world, as an example, like, which affects all of us, every time the phone rings, every time an email comes in, every time we get a text message, many of us just open up that email, respond to that phone call, look at the text, and sometimes actually like click the link. And
Mhm.
what we should be doing is stop, look at, okay, what's the motivation of what it is that I'm looking at? What is its intent and purpose? What are the risks of me clicking that link, making that phone call, engaging this person over the phone, providing the information, and so on? We actually like stop what we're doing and intellectually look at and analyze the current situation that we're in. For me, for us, in regards to security, that inbound communication on the job, in a say warehouse environment, it's addressing what that red flag might be, what that something out of place might be, what that noise might have been, and so on, and reacting to it intellectually first, and going through a checklist of, okay, next steps.
Okay. And we typically find this a lot with our employees. They're on the job. They have to make their widgets and so it's such a time, get everything done without incident. And of course, you throw into that the potential fear. Oh my God, I spilled my chemical. Now I got to report this. How do I overcome that fear that that person has to report to management? That like you're talking about the frictionless, in the electronic world, you've got reporting requirements. In the world of a physical plant employee, you got to report that to somebody. Now that could mean potential penalty, right? If I'm seen as the worker that, complains or what, what, where do we overcome that?
That is a huge problem in a corporate setting, which often results in shame. And that shame prevents humans from acting uh, effectively now and in the future, right? That's just how we are. To build that frictionless culture, EHS managers must move from that shame based reaction to, well, predictive processing. Shift the focus from the individual's error to the system focused hazard, documenting it, understanding it, knowing what to do in the future if it was to happen. Treat it as data versus, punishment, let's say, right? Which we have been blaming the victim for hundreds of years. Like, for example, in my world, a company is breached. They have a data breach. The news media says, oh, Target had a data breach, 250 million records compromised. What did they do wrong? They shame on Target. It's like, well, wait a minute now. They're a victim of a crime. Okay, they have people, within their organization whose job it is to manage the risk to prevent something like that from happening. But occasionally it does. Like even if you have a home security system and you have it turned on and you have door reinforcement technologies and you have signs that say protected by ADT and you have motion lighting and beware of dog signs, that doesn't mean that a burglar can't kick in your back door and still get in, run up to your bedroom and grab your wife's jewelry box. Is it your fault that that happened? I mean, you were a victim of a crime. Stuff
Right,
happens, right?
right.
So, like we talked about, using predictive processing, shifting the focus from an individual's error to the system focus hazard, use simple one-touch reporting apps, making a quick phone call to make flagging a tripping hazard as easy as clicking a phishing alert, notification, right? Address the information gap by sharing how each report closed um, a like human blind spot, so to speak, for the whole team. This creates that yes ladder of a number of different safety wins, transforming the warehouse into you know, a place where people feel reporting risk is a okay and positive, healthy thing to do, and as a reflex, not necessarily as a risk.
Sure. So it sounds like it's an overall corporate safety culture that you're kind of embedding in to step away from the blaming and the shaming to an overall participatory process that gets you to overcome that.
You know, yes, exactly. In the world of security, the chief information security officer, I talk to them a lot, and I often hear from them, and they're like, they're frustrated. Why do my employees not understand that the email they're getting is not from Amazon? How many times do I have to tell them it's not from Amazon?
Right.
And they're frustrated and they're to a degree angered by that. And
Sure.
and often like I might even hear, how can they be so stupid?
Right.
Being very critical. And I
Sure.
get all that. I understand the frustration. I understand it 1,000%. But human beings in general, we are somewhat risk adverse. Like we truly don't want to think that bad things can happen to us. The fundamental recognizing that humans gravitate towards pleasure and away from pain. We don't want to think or believe that these things can happen to us. We have cognitive biases that prevent us from seeing this stuff. And so if we were to approach our people with even an ounce more empathy and just, where they're at in their lives, they might have a dad who's got dementia. They might have a wife who's, suffering from partum after a pregnancy. Like it could be anything going on in their life that's just distracting them. But like, and I and I say the same thing to the CISOs. I'm not asking you to give your coworkers a hug. I'm not asking you to hold their hand. I'm
Sure.
just asking you to like talk to them the same way you would if your 16-year-old son or daughter came home upset because something happened at school that day that truly rattled them, and just like address them where they're at and just kind of like sit down and have a conversation and find out like what's bothering them. And then like step by step, slow by slow, just engage them as you would that loved one who just needs a bit more that day with as much tact and patience as you possibly can
Yeah.
without feeling that you're getting kumbaya.
Which is what we don't, typically expect in the workplace anyway. But
Yeah.
it sounds like it's empathy. Come in with empathy as if they are your family member.
We've lost that to a degree in this current world on fire culture that we're living
Sure.
in, and it's
Sure.
so unnecessary.
Mhm. Agreed. It's simple humanity,
Yeah.
and important to stress that.
And when we're talking about safety and security, these are things, issues, topics that elicit reactions of worry and fear and overwhelm immediately, which require a higher level of empathy.
Love it. Love it. That's great advice. So you're known as the architect of the strategic human firewall for digital threats. Could you explain what that is?
Sure. Thank you. So building a strategic human firewall essentially is somebody who recognizes risk, both in your personal and professional life. So for me, recognizing that risk is, again, when that phone call, email, or text message comes in, I'm looking at, okay, what is the motivation behind that? I kind of alluded to this earlier, right? And even me, like personally, when I'm out and about and I'm with my family, right, and we're walking through the north end of Boston, this is the example I'm going to use. I'm the one that says, hey, there's dog poop, don't step in it. Okay. I just see this stuff coming. I see a big crack in the sidewalk because the concrete's been elevated because the root of the tree has pushed it up. I'm the one that says, hey, pay attention to that. And I'm doing that, in the front of the pack, making sure that my loved ones don't step in something, don't trip in something, and are paying attention. Why? Because I've trained myself to do that, right? And I am the strategic human firewall in my own life, right? And to a degree for the people in my own life that I am responsible for, but at the same time, I am, educating and informing and making those aware as to what their role is to become their own strategic human firewall. Right? It's just recognizing deception, it's recognizing hazard, it's recognizing risk. Okay. And so in the HasCom culture, so to speak, building a strategic human firewall shifts the general duty from a corporate policy to a collective reflex. It's like, we're all in this together. We're all looking for it. We're not worried about it. We're not in fear of it. We're not paranoid of it. We just look for it intellectually. Instead of, passive compliance, the workforce is trained into a predictive processing to identify the information gap between a safe environment and a developing hazard, right? To act as a firewall, we as employees, as consumers, as people on the web, need like what might be called a pattern interrupt that break the cycle of complacency. It's not going to happen to me like these things do. And, we just got to be paying attention. And by simplifying protocols in a HasCom situation for cognitive fluency, safety becomes, again, that yes ladder of small habitual checks. This turns every worker, again, into a sensor they're paying attention, they're alert, they're aware. And we close that human blind spot I referred to and proactively neutralize environmental risks before they escalate into incidents like a tripping hazard, slip or fall, stepping in poop.
Quite literally. And many people in our audience are trainers in the workforce, and they get this all the time as far as, you know, mixing things up in their training. How do we get our trainers to get to that human firewall mindset to make sure that their employees aren't stepping in poop like chemical exposure
Yeah, well,
or
we
but
start with empathy, right? Start with that. Um, we're not shoving it down anybody's throat. We're engaging and addressing people where they're at, and that takes a lot of patience. And frankly, not everybody should be in the business of conveying information if they can't do that. If they can't, I learned I've been doing what I do for 30 plus years professionally, and long ago, someone said to me, and I heard this, and I live by it. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that that truly matters in our profession, whether it's safety or security. Like you truly are in the business of ultimately saving lives. That is a higher calling, and that requires a certain kind of person to do that. Okay. So that said, to make safety or security stick, we must reframe it from a corporate mandate to, preventative medicine, so to speak. Um, say for the home, you know, like locking your doors and installing a home security system and proper lighting on the
Mhm.
perimeter, not just for security but for safety, right? Um, by teaching the strategic human firewall mindset as a life skill, we bridge the information gap between workplace rules and, say, family protection. Making it personal to the learner. Like, for example, like in my line of work, when I'm say making it personal, like there's nothing more personal when it comes to security than violence prevention or protecting your own identity. And when you make safety and or security personal, um, as a selfish creature, which is what we are by default, that's an important thing. Actually, it's good to be selfish in regards to making sure that you get a good night's sleep, you consume the right amount of food and fluids for nourishment. Like we need that. We need to be selfish in that regard. And there's a reason when it comes to say safety or security, when you are on a flight and the flight attendant is providing safety instructions, and she talks about putting the oxygen mask on. What does she say to do?
Put it on yourself first, right?
Yeah, because you are better at helping others once you take care of yourself first. So
Sure.
when we kind of reframe safety instruction and security instruction to the individual and where they're at and their worries and their concerns and make it a bit more personal, you're actively involving them in that what's in it for me, selfish or self-interested mindset. There's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
It's good to teach from that perspective at a minimum. You teach it as a
Excellent.
life skill. When employees have that understanding, like again in my world, like verifying a text message before clicking, or making sure that the ladder is, stable before getting on it, um, or in their personal life, protecting their own children, when it comes to crossing the street or from a predator or from an identity thief. uh, Training gains a lot more cognitive fluency. It
Mhm.
makes more sense to them. I call this in my line of work. I call it the kitchen table approach,
Right.
where you create this yes ladder effect, ensuring that they bring these habits home to safeguard their loved ones, and it becomes just a part of their own family's culture, and then it rolls into work.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I think we need more of that to bring the message home. And when it's in your family, it becomes your extended family at work, right? So you're keeping them safe. And next, when you're speaking to an EHS leader or an information safety officer right now, what's one simple shift they can make this week? No new tools, no big programs that'll instantly reduce human risk.
We've talked a lot about that, especially in the last explanation, I guess. To instantly reduce human risk, shift your focus from compliance to cognition. Get where the human's at. The most effective move you can make this week is to simplify your communications to favor how the brain actually processes information under stress. Like, spend some time with that. Delivering long form directives and start using contextual cues. When you speak to your team, don't just list rules, present scenarios they can recognize, ask them to identify, something that feels off or looks off. This simple act of pausing to evaluate a situation rather than just following a checklist breaks that, cycle of autopilot. And that also breaks that cognitive bias. It's not going to happen to me, all that stuff. Like, just talk to them. You'd be surprised what a conversation can reveal. You'd be amazed, you know?
Yeah, don't go into autopilot with your training.
Yeah.
Sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent.
Look at when I like, keeping in mind, like, when I'm getting on a platform, I'm talking about violence and theft prevention, right? So take my perspective from here, right? Violence and theft prevention is like predators. It's sociopaths and psychopaths that mean to do us harm. These are humans that look like us and act like us, but they don't think like you and I do. The medical community considers them antisocial personalities. They have a disorder, they say, that prevents them from experiencing empathy, sympathy, guilt, or remorse. That these are human beings that truly have no shame. They just don't. And they look at you and I as their natural prey, like they are deserving of what we have, so to speak, whether it's our physical being or our, resources, our money. And I don't know that, a chemical spill cares about you either. You know what I'm saying? Like, they
Right.
are predatory in their nature too, when you think
Yeah.
about it. They have no remorse, no empathy, no sympathy, no guilt, and they're like, they truly can hurt and harm the same way a bad actor can, right?
Right.
And ultimately, like, what we want to do is make reporting frictionless, make it easy, don't engage in any shaming, even slapping on the wrist for that matter, right? If an employee flags a potential hazard, respond with immediate positive reinforcement rather than an investigation. I mean, yes, an investigation generally is necessary, but I guess reframe it a little bit so it doesn't seem so intimidating. When people feel that speaking up is the easiest and safest path, again, that's just, having a little empathy there. And they naturally become active sensors for the organization. Like, you're involving them in the process.
Right.
The strategic human firewall is engaging each employee so that they become a human sensor network. They recognize risk as it is occurring. They are the eyes and ears and the voice for everybody. Like, they want to make sure that everybody is okay and they see this coming and they want everybody to recognize it too, just like they have. Like, they are part of the solution, right? And so by reducing the mental effort required to be safe or secure, and reducing those social costs of being wrong, shame, you close that gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it. People feel compelled and empowered to engage. This builds a culture where safety and security is a shared reflex rather than a forced requirement.
Facts. Fascinating. That's a great concept. Thank you for that. And what do you think are your final thoughts to end on for the audience? What is their takeaway you want to give them?
One of the things that I often like for a chief information security officer would say, how do I implement this? Like, how do I get funding for this?
Mhm.
You know? And I say, well,
Important.
listen, like I guarantee you that your COO, your safety manager, whoever that might be, whoever's responsible for your budget, whatever the case might be, whoever's responsible for, giving you the freedom to do what you need to do, they have the same uh, risk in their own lives. They have the same issues with their own family. They have the same, and I'm speaking from a security perspective, right? They have the same mom who can't stop clicking links, or the same dad that responds to every pop up that he thinks is Apple, and he calls the number, and now they're remotely on his machine. Like, talk to that person who has your budget the same way that you would talk to your own family in regards to those risks, those fires that they need to put out, and remind them that, like, you know they have those same people in their lives that have those same worries and fears and concerns and risks, and all of our employees are the same in that regard. And
Sure.
while, like, we've been building this culture for so many years, like, there's always going to be more to do, as in security. Safety never sleeps. Security and safety are 24/7, 365. Safety and security are journeys. They're not necessarily a destination. It's not ever a place that you fully arrive to. I mean, you hope at the end of the day, at the end of the shift, you got there. You weren't hacked. Nobody got hurt. Sure. But it is an ongoing process of recognizing risk, whichever it is. And when we instill that in people as, like, the job is never done, that we're always going to be, for the rest of our lives, every time I head into Boston with my girls and go to the North End for dinner, I'm still going to make sure that nobody steps in poop.
That's a excellent takeaway. So, reminder to our audience: don't step in poop. Right. Well, Robert, it's been a pleasure having you on today. For more about Robert's bio, please visit our website, hackyourhascom.com. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave your feedback. Thanks again, Robert.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.